Love whiskey? This may be your dream vacation. Speyside is one of Scotland's 5 whiskey regions. With the sea and the port of Garmouth nearby, the clear-running River Spey, and the fertile barley-growing plains all about, it's easy to see why this region became malt whiskey country. The rugged landscape is home to more than half of Scotland's malt whiskey distilleries. And in recent years, the area has found a new way to open up the best it has to offer to tourists and whiskey fans of all stripes: the Whisky Trail. It's not actually a trail per se, it's essentially a driving tour. The whole region includes helpful signage for you to find your way from one distillery to the next. Now, there are dozens of sites you can visit along the trail, but the most popular itinerary covers about 75 miles of driving and takes about 3 days to complete. It includes 7 world-famous working distilleries, 1 historic distillery, and the Speyside cooperage. You ready? Let's get started. Day 1. The Glenliddich Distillery. Your whiskey pilgrimage begins in the heart of Speyside at the Glenliver Distillery in Banffshire. The history of this famous distillery encapsulates the history of Scottish whiskey as a whole. She is the grande dame of Speyside. In 1823, George Smith, who was operating an illicit distillery on his farm, became the first person in Scotland to apply for and receive a license to legally produce spirits. This actually made him very unpopular with his outlaw neighbors, and he even had to take to carrying pistols around as a precaution. But clearly he made the right decision. The full story of the Glenlivet is just as fascinating. The distillery offers a guided tour that will give you a rare insight into the history of this beloved single malt. You even get to sample a dram drawn straight from a cask in warehouse number 3. And speaking of illegal whiskey makers, while you're here, take time to hike the Smuggler's Trail. This walking trail heads out from the Glenlivet estate grounds, up into the hills, and then back. You'll experience several beautiful views. In addition, you'll pass by a stone cairn that marks the location of the original Glenlivet Distillery before it moved to its present site in 1859. You'll also pass close by Castle Blairfindie and the Castleton houses. These homes were originally built for distillery workers and are named for the castle. Cardhu Distillery. After Glenlivet, you'll follow the River Spey north to Knockandu for a tour of the Cardhu Distillery. Founded illegally in 1811 by whiskey smuggler Helen Cumming and her husband John, Cardhu has a great history. Helen herself was a genius businesswoman. Among her many talents was fooling the police into thinking the odor of the mash was just her baking bread. You may find your samples here seem a little bit familiar. That's because for over 100 years, the distillery's products have been the main element in the blends of Johnnie Walker. The Speyside Cooperage. The final stop of the day is the Speyside cooperage in Moray. The cooperage was founded by the Taylor family in 1947 and is the largest independent cooperage in the UK. You'll get to see the ancient art of crafting whiskey barrels using traditional tools and methods. You can even get a miniature cask as a souvenir. Visitors in the area often stay the night at the famous Craigellachie Hotel, home of the famous Copper Dog pub. And no surprise, Copper Dog also has their very own whiskey. Day 2. The Glenliddich Distillery. Day 2 includes 3 working distilleries as you arrive in Dufftown, known as the malt whiskey capital of the world. To start, you can sample the water of life at the beloved Glenliddich Distillery. It took William Grant and his family about 18 months to build what would become one of the greatest distilleries in the world. The name translates to Valley of the Stag, and their first batch appeared on Christmas Day in 1887. Oh, and the very first stills that were used here were actually bought from the Cardhu Distillery down the road. It's a small world. One of the special highlights of visiting Glenfiddich is their half-day Pioneers Tour. You get to actually bottle your own Glenfiddich directly from the cask. A masterclass level tasting is also included. You really just can't beat this one. The Glenfiddich Distillery operates the Malt Barn Cafe, and we highly recommend enjoying a delicious breakfast or lunch here before continuing your journey. If time permits, make a short detour to the storied ruins of Balvenie Castle in Dufftown. Once a possession of the Black Douglases, this site witnessed some truly dramatic history. There's also a small distillery operated there too. Glen Grant Distillery. A leisurely drive next brings you to Rothes, home of the Glen Grant Distillery. This is the only whiskey distillery that is still named after its founding owners, and produces a distinctive product. Glen Grant was founded in 1840 by brothers John and James Grant, outlaw distillers and smugglers who went legit. The history of the company includes many anecdotes about the adventurous James the Major Grant, who inherited the company from the founders and was a legendary innovator, socializer, and traveler. The Major introduced the tall, slender stills and purifiers, which created the fresh, malty flavor and clear color Glen Grant products are famous for now. The history of the distillery is great, and so are the beautiful Victorian gardens that surround it. Strathaila Distillery. Need a rest? Make it quick, because just 20 minutes more in the car will find you in Keith. But it's not just a trip in miles, this is a trip back in time. You're about to experience Strathaila Distillery, the oldest continuously operating distillery in the Highlands, now home to Chivas Regal. Whiskey's been made here since 1786. Originally named the Milltown Distillery, Strathaila was founded by George Taylor and Alexander Milne as an alternative to the failing flax dressing industry they had grown up with. In 1879, the distillery suffered a ravaging fire, but was rebuilt and expanded to include a bottling plant. Today, Strathaila is noted for their range of Chivas Regal premium blended whiskeys, as well as their 12-year-old single malt. Your tour will include some great samples and an insight into the art of whiskey blending. Day 3. Moray Distillery. Your final day on the trail begins with a tour of the Moray Distillery in Elgin. This storied and accomplished distillery began production in 1897, and was in fact originally a brewery run by Robert Thorne and Sons. In the 1920s, it was taken over by the MacDonald and Muir families, owners of the Glenmorangie Distillery. Moray has won many awards over the years. Their 1994 sherry cask finish was ranked Best Speyside Single Cask Single Malt in 2018. You'll get 2 options for tours. The basic tour allows you to observe the company's small, dedicated team crafting their single malt, or for more rigorous whiskey students, there's the 5th chapter tour, led by the distillery manager. This distillery also offers a cafe, and again, we think it's a good idea to take advantage of it to fuel up. Benromach Distillery. Next comes Forres and the Benromach Distillery. Founded by Duncan McCallum and F.W. Brickman in 1898, the operation has gone through several ups and downs and several owners. It was shut down completely in 1983. In 1993, Gordon and MacPhail of Elgin took over the site. Restoration began in 1997, and in 1998 the distillery was officially reopened by Prince Charles. Bottling of the new malt started in 2004. The distillery has long enjoyed spring water from the Chapelton Springs in the Romoch Hills outside of Forres, and this has helped them produce award-winning products as well as the world's first fully certified organic single malt. The distillery manager will be happy to tell you all about it. Plus, this is another great hands-on tour where you get to bottle your own whiskey. Dallas Dhu Historic Distillery. For your last stop on the trail, you'll explore the Dallas Dhu Historic Distillery. Originally named Dallas Moor, this distillery was built in 1898 by entrepreneur Alexander Edward on the Sanquhar estate just outside Forres. When ownership changed to Wright and Grieg Limited in 1899, it was renamed to Dallas Dhu, which is Gaelic for Blackwater Valley. The first thing you'll notice is the elegant pagoda roof. This is an example of the breakthrough ventilator system invented by Scottish architect Charles C. Doig. This site has had a complex history and several owners. For instance, most of the equipment was powered by steam engines and a large water wheel until the 1950s, when electric power was added. Coal fires heated the stills right up until 1971. Production ceased at Dallas Dhu in 1983, but luckily for us, the distillery has been lovingly preserved and transformed into a museum under Scotland's Historic Buildings and Monuments Directorate. The audio-visual presentation gets top scores from attendees. Want to go? Check out the official Whisky Trail website for ideas on how to craft your own trip to the heart of whiskey country. We based our itinerary on their recommendations, but there are dozens of distilleries in the region you can also consider visiting, so be selective. And make sure you allow enough time to relax and enjoy, rather than cramming in too many stops. Now, this is a driving exercise, so you must be prepared for that. If you can arrange a group tour or a designated driver, it'll be a lot easier to let yourself drink samples without worry. On the other hand, Speyside is only a couple of hours drive north of Edinburgh, so it's easy to work this into any vacation plan you have. Fair warning, you may not want to come home. So what do you think? Is this the ultimate vacation plan? Which distillery would you want to see the most? For that matter, what's your favorite whiskey? Let us know in the comments, and if you liked this video or found it helpful, be sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you get notifications for all the new content we do. In the meantime, have a great day, guys.